Hi guys, how are you today? In this video, we're gonna bust a few myths about self-harm. Before we go any further, please note that this topic is potentially triggering for some. If you find this triggering, skip this video, and may I suggest that you talk to a mental health professional near you because it's important that you take good care of yourself. I'm Huey. I'm a licensed professional counselor at Heart to Heart with Me, and I post mental health education videos on a weekly basis. So, what is self-harm? Self-harm is the act of deliberately inflicting pain and damage to one's own body. Self-harm is also known as non-suicidal self-injury. As the name suggested, people who self-harm has no intention to end their life. And this brings us to our first myth about self-harm. That is, people who self-harm want to end their lives. And this is not true. The goal of someone harming themselves versus someone who attempted suicide is very different. There are a few reasons as to why people would harm themselves, such as shifting focus or attention when they are spiraling, to release pent-up emotion, to make themselves feel something when they are numb or dissociated. And also, it's a form of self-punishment. And of course, the purpose of a suicide attempt is to end one's life. Although we know the goal of someone attempting suicide and self-harming is different, they are not mutually exclusive, because research shows that someone who is afflicted by mood disorders such as bipolar, depression, anxiety, etc., has a higher tendency of self-harming. But then again, not all who suffer from mood disorder would harm themselves. Number 2, because it's cool. This is not true, because people who self-harm would cover their scars and wound with long sleeves or long pants. They prefer not to talk about it, and there's a great deal of guilt and shame that revolves around self-harming. Number 3, self-harm is cutting. Cutting is the more common form of self-harming, but it is not the only way of self-harm. People who self-harm also would burn themselves, punch the wall, punch themselves, scratch their skin, or even have unsafe sex, etc. At the end of the day, it is the act of inflicting pain and damage to one's own body. Number 4, it only happens to teenagers. Yes, research does show that the majority people who self-harm are teenagers, but not all who self-harm are teenagers. Adults too would self-harm. Number 5, it only happens to females. Research shows that there's a higher percentage of female teenagers who would self-harm compared to male teenagers. Again, it happens to both genders. Number 6, they are just seeking attention. That, again, it's not true. As mentioned earlier, the reason people self-harm includes release pent-up emotions or shifting focus, etc. It is not to seek attention. But then again, people self-harm because there's a great deal of pain that they're experiencing, particularly emotional pain. If those scars grabbed your attention, it is saying they need help. If someone that you know is harming themselves, take a deep breath, calm yourself down, be there for them, and help them to seek help. In the next video, I'll talk about how to talk to someone, such as your friend or your child, who you suspect is self-harming. If you find this information helpful, give us a like and subscribe. Comment down below and let us know the question that you have about this topic. If this topic interests you, watch this next video. You are encouraged to use the information in this video to improve your mental health. However, this is not a substitute for professional help.